order to better understand roads and road funding in Michigan, it's important for us to understand who is really responsible for Michigan's roads. There are actually 3 levels of jurisdiction for roads and bridges in Michigan. The state has control over about 10,000 miles of roadway, or about 8% of the public roads in Michigan. And county road commissions have 90,000 miles under their jurisdiction, or about 75%. And then cities and villages have about 21,000, or approximately 17%. Now, it's important to remember that 75%, because when we come back and talk about the distribution of funding between the Department of Transportation, cities and villages, and county road commissions, you'll see that road commissions at the county level for county road systems are inadequately funded. With that in mind, why are Michigan's roads in the condition they're in? And Michigan has had a history for the past 50 years of not putting enough money into its roads. If you look at the dollars that flow into Michigan's roads, and you compare it to dollars per mile, dollars per lane mile, dollars per bridge, dollars per licensed driver, dollars per licensed vehicle, in the past 10 years, Michigan has ranked no higher than 45th out of 48. And most of the time, we're down at the real bottom. We have a low rank amongst the states, and it's both in terms of gas and per capita spending on roads. The last time that the gas tax was raised was in 1997, when it was raised to 19 cents a gallon. And not all of that comes into roads, as you'll see later on. When you look at the source of Michigan's roads, you can see from the diagram that you're looking at now that about 44% comes from vehicle registration fees, about 45% comes from the gas tax, and that represents about 88%, and then the rest of it comes from the diesel fuel tax, the diesel carrier tax, and miscellaneous revenues. There is a 6% sales tax on gasoline and diesel fuel sales, but none of that money goes towards roads. It all goes into the general fund. Interestingly enough, when you look if you look at just the fuel tax that's going on to roads in Michigan, Michigan is, as I've indicated earlier, is down at the bottom, usually 47th to 48th. However, because when you add the sales tax in, the total tax on roads, Michigan ranks right at about number 7. But again, none of that sales tax goes towards the repair of roads and bridges in Michigan. Now, the Michigan Transportation Fund is the fund that's set up under the Constitution to receive the fuel taxes and the revenue from license and license plate registration. And if you look at the chart that you're seeing right now, you can see that, for instance, we started out in FY 2006 with 1.98, almost $2 billion that were received into the fund. And now you're looking at a series of administration, recreation, critical bridge fund, railroad crossing, the economic development fund, the local road programs, mass transit, MDOT bridges, and MDOT debt servicing comes right off the top of the fund before there's any distribution to any of the users. And in FY 2006, when that was taken, when those off the top deductions were made, there was $1.6 billion remaining to be distributed amongst the road maintenance agencies. If you look at the bottom of the chart, you can see how that was distributed. The Michigan Department of Transportation got 40% of that, road commissions got about 40%, and cities and villages got 21.8%. But again, if you look at that, remember that in our earlier chart, we saw that about 8% of Michigan's public roads were under the Department of Transportation, while road commissions in their county road systems had jurisdiction over 75% of the public roads mileage in Michigan. So you can see there's an inadequacy in the amount of money that's flowing into county road commissions in Michigan. You'll also note that while the Michigan Department of Transportation receives 39.1% of the Michigan transportation funds according to the formula, when you add in the final deductions that go to MDOT, for instance the half penny dedicated to the MDOT bridges and the 1997 truck registration increase, the Michigan Department of Transportation actually receives 44% of the overall Michigan Transportation Fund's revenues, and it uses those to maintain the state trunk line system. Well, what's wrong with the road funding in Michigan right now? What's wrong with the Michigan Transportation Fund? And frankly, what's wrong with it is it hasn't kept pace with the expenditures or the changes in technology. The Michigan Transportation Fund was funded on the fundamental principle that the users of the road pay for the road. And that's the underlying principle in all of the road tax strategies in Michigan. The revenue from the flat gas tax has fallen while the costs associated with road maintenance and road reconstruction have skyrocketed. In the past 10 years, the revenues are down approximately 15% due to greater fuel efficiencies, alternative fuels, hybrids, and the number of vehicle miles traveled is also being reduced.